Welcome to Logic Forever Has a Shadow, the final part in my Shadow commentary series. Now, for this final grand finale, I'm going to be tackling Some Call Me Johnny's review. Now, quick disclaimer, I'm going to be far more harsher on this guy than I was with the others because Some Call Me Johnny is every single thing I can't stand about online reviewers all boiled into one thing, with the exception of a bunch of annoying sketches. He's not all that informative, he can't give anything outside of the apparent. He doesn't really give any idea of who might like the product, he just assumes that everyone thinks like him, and apparently a lot of people do, and his fans pretty much are the type of people that want to reinforce his opinion on everything, and then, if you try to argue, they'll just say, well, he said this, and he's right because he has thousands of subscribers, and you're just jealous. But I do want to get this out of the way, this will be harsher, just to let you know. With that being said, let's carry on. I know you're trying to make a point by saying you're not looking forward to this, but really, if that's all you're going to do is just sit there, you really should just cut it out. It adds absolutely nothing, and it just wastes time.
So, because Rouge, or anybody else for that matter, seem to not really care about explaining Shadow's past to him in Sonic Heroes, we have an entire game focusing on that instead.
Okay, how much do characters like Rouge and Sonic and all that really know about Shadow? You went into so much depth, and I use that term very loosely, in Sonic Adventure 2's story, and all you could really have found out about Rouge looking into Shadow's past was that he was just a prototype? Heck, all she says is that his memories might not be real, and that's it. How was she supposed to know anything about him? Outside of maybe just lying to him to get what she wants, which is, to be fair, what she does in Heroes. Then again, that really wouldn't make any of the other characters any better than someone like, say, Eggman. But, despite that, giving a bit of mystery can actually allow for the headcanon territory, which also helps with the multiple pathways, which you don't mention because that would hurt your argument and give an idea that there is an audience for a game like this.
Shadow the Hedgehog. Like many people, when the first ever trailer debuted for this game, I seriously thought this was an April Fool's joke. The concept was just so absurd. Shadow the Hedgehog packing heat? What? Why? What's the deal with the whole renegade or hero gimmick? Didn't Heroes establish that he's at most an anti-hero? Look at him in the intro of Team Dark Story. He rescues Rouge from Omega's opening assault. Oh, such a renegade. The game's very existence just seemed ridiculous to me. Who the hell asked for this? Yeah, Shadow became popular in the Sonic universe, but did anybody seriously wanted this? Well, despite how silly the game looked, I ended up buying it anyway. I mean, who knows? Despite its questionable premise, this could be a fun game in its own right, and at the end of the day, that's what matters most, right?
I'll get along to this point as we go along, but you do not give this game any sort of chance. All you do is compare it to other games, and in fact, you actually contradict statements that you made in your other reviews, which I'll also get to when we get along the way.
But before we head into the game, however, let's start with the plot. The journey begins with Shadow staring into the horizon. Shadow begins to question about his past and who exactly this Maria character is, but before he could potentially get the idea to just ask Rouge or anybody else for that matter, aliens.
See what I mean? And this isn't the only time it happens.
As the aliens begin to run amok through the city, the leader of the group, Black Doom, confronts Shadow and tells him to deliver the Chaos Emeralds as promised. Shadow, realistically, has no idea what the fuck he's talking about, but instead of Black Doom answering to his suspicions, he just disappears, causing some random explosions around Shadow. With no idea what to do or who to rely on, except these guys.
Again, they know nothing about Shadow. All they know is that he was a science experiment, and that he should have died, and that he somehow came back. And how is that supposed to help him in any sort of way?
Shadow makes it his goal to collect the Chaos Emeralds and find the answers to his past. At this point, the whole good and evil thing comes to play. Each stage contains multiple missions that correspond to a different allegiance, dark, neutral, or hero. Depending on your choice, your pathway will branch into a different direction, leading not only to a different stage, but also to a different ending when your pathway is complete.
It's almost like this game is a choose-your-own-adventure game. Oh wait, it is. He's going to complain about one big aspect, which for the most part I do agree with, although I will defend it when we get to there. But This is advertised as a choose-your-own-adventure game, so really, how could it have been any bit of a surprise?
So, it's up to you. Do you ally yourself with Black Doom and take over the world? Do you go solo, remain neutral throughout the game? Or will you team up with the good guys and put an end to Black Doom's scheme? Well folks, in the end that doesn't mean a goddamn thing because there's a last story segment that has Shadow ultimately stop Black Doom's plans and save the world from what's possibly the worst story device ever to rear its head into the franchise, making the entire concept of the game entirely worthless. Why did they do that? I mean, why make us think our choices matter in the grand scheme of things and then completely nullify it with a last story segment that's officially canon to the Sonic universe? I mean, what about the people that wanted an evil Shadow the Hedgehog? Don't those people's choices matter too?
While that is an annoyance, I'm more amused how some people are annoyed that some endings aren't true in a choose-your-own-adventure game, especially one that has to, for a series that has to continue on, so it's clearly there. But the thing is, the tons of routes that it goes on allows for the player to just decide for themselves how the whole story went out. It's a little crappy, I will admit, but I'm quite amused how poor execution must mean it must be thrown away. But then again, as long as it's not Sonic 3 and Knuckles, everything must be thrown away, isn't it, Johnny? But with that out of the way, I'm going to skip the rest of the story because I do agree it's very confusing and all that. And in all honesty, it's just time wasting like every one of his story summaries. He could just give the first little beginning of the plot and it would be pretty accurate and would actually help with his structure and it would waste less time.
So with the story, if you can call it that, out of the way, let's get into the gameplay. Now, if I could credit Shadow the Hedgehog for one thing, there's only one gameplay style to talk about, which makes it easier on me when reviewing it. The team mechanic from Sonic Heroes is gone, it's just Shadow from beginning to end. Okay, so in terms of what Shadow can do, well, he can pretty much do everything he could do in Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Heroes, except the Somersault and the Rocket Excel. That's no longer here, but the Spin Dash is back, and it's not really useful. You can only perform it while standing still, and because of that, it's not as fun to use as it was in Adventure 1 or Adventure 2, but it is better than the Rocket Excel, that's most important. But the biggest addition to gameplay here is guns, or weapons in general to be a little more precise. By defeating a certain enemy or by smashing conveniently placed crates, Shadow can equip himself with a weapon to help take out enemies. The type of weapon varies from level to level, but most of the time it's guns like your average semi-automatic pistol, laser guns, or bazookas. To be honest guys, while I find the mere concept of Shadow using firearms just plain ridiculous, the gunplay in this game is actually not that bad. Enemies are once again rocking health bars like in Sonic Heroes, but with a weapon, enemies go down real easily. Shadow can still take out enemies the traditional way, such as jumping on them or using the homing attack, but the game really wants you to use weapons, and they work rather well. I especially get a kick out of the vacuum gun, an homage to Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. Is that game any good? Anyway. I just wish guns had a manual lock-on function. The auto-aiming works well enough, but for certain guns, mainly bazookas and rocket launchers, I wish the game tapped into its inner Ocarina at a time and had some sort of manual lock-on feature.
So what I'm getting at right now is that the main gameplay aspect works very well, but he's confused how a weapon that has a giant blast radius decided to sacrifice aim for power.
But in case you're not packing heat and for some reason don't feel like using the homing attack, Shadow also has basic punches and kicks. And they're shit! Seriously people, don't use these attacks, they're worthless. Piss poor damage and piss poor range.
The punches and kicks are for breaking crates and doors. Oh, and by the way, thanks for not explaining that and just letting me do it for you.
Plastered in some stages are vehicles that Shadow can ride. Don't. Please. Shadow's not only naturally faster than all these vehicles, but the control and traction on these things are remarkably clunky. I'd rather be in Eggman's Mac & Adventure 2.
Really? I found the vehicles to control rather well. Admittedly, they're not as fast, and to be honest, they're more just kind of a background thing to play with, kind of like the street signs that you find, and they do have a purpose of, well, allowing you to run through tons of enemies. Here's a clip.
Finally, Shadow has two special abilities, Chaos Control and Chaos Blast. By destroying enemies of a certain allegiance, you slowly build up the corresponding meter. When the meter is maxed out, you can activate the special ability by pressing the Y button, assuming you're playing the GameCube version. If you take out anything that represents the good side, you'll feel your evil energy, and if you destroy anything evil, you'll fill up your good energy. When your evil energy is maxed out, Shadow can perform the Chaos Blast, destroying anything caught in the huge explosion. When your good energy is maxed out, Shadow can perform Chaos Control, allowing him to zip by a large chunk of the stage. Chaos Control, though, really isn't that useful unless your current mission only requires you to reach a goal ring. If you're trying to kill a certain amount of enemies or objects to complete a mission, then zipping past the stage is the last thing you want to do. The best part of the Chaos powers, however, is that when your meter is filled up, Shadow is not only completely impervious to attack, but he also has infinite ammo until the meter runs out. Screw Chaos Blast and screw Chaos Control, infinite ammo is where it's at. I can shoot like a goddamn madman with an overly large Gatling gun, and it'll provide better results than a measly explosion attack.
And you can also use Chaos Blast on the last few seconds before the meter goes out.
So, Shadow's a pretty capable Hedgehog in terms of combat, but in terms of control, I swear it's worse than Sonic Heroes.
Yeah, no, having played both Heroes and Shadow back to back for the sake of this video, I can without a doubt say that Shadow has far better controls, mostly thanks to it not being as floaty, though it still is kind of floaty, and most of all, it has far better button layout. It's easier to perform the light speed dash, and it's easier to switch between rails when rail grinding. And it's also easier to jump from platform to platform. In Sonic Heroes, you pretty much needed the flying character to do it.
Shadow's always moving like he's on ice, especially at high speeds, and maybe it's just me, but even the basic tasks like jumping from platform to platform feels pretty sluggish. Speed? Well, unless it's a scripted loop, a straight pathway with no obstacles or rail grinding, you're not getting any in this game. For about 80% of the game, I'm just carefully tapping the analog stick, tackling the hordes of enemies that block my path with a carefully timed homing attack or shooting them with a gun.
It's almost as if this game is a spin-off where instead of heavy focus on speed, its main focus is on platforming and at fighting enemies.
Shadow the Hedgehog is considered a spin-off game, but I assure you, in addition to having a plot that's part of the official canon, it's a 3D Sonic game, people. I already mentioned that Shadow could do pretty much everything he could do in the previous games, but besides that, there's loops to run through, rings to collect, power-ups to help defend yourself, dash panels to do the work for you. Everything you will find in the adventure games and Sonic Heroes, well, in Sonic stages anyway, is all here and accounted for.
In terms of gameplay, yeah, it's the same, but in terms of level design and level progression, it is vastly different. Yeah, there's a couple of those occasional bits that are like the original ones, but if that makes something not a spin-off, then I guess Wario Land isn't a spin-off of Super Mario Land.